So February, COVID shuts down. I get a mic and a camera and I set it up. And I'm like, all right, I gotta, I'm just gonna, whoever wants a meeting, I'm just gonna put it out there. And I started putting it on Facebook. Are you worried about your money? Are you worried about your money? And I was just doing, and all of a sudden I was getting meetings in Colorado and California and Wisconsin. And my calendar was full. I was going to take 3 or 4 more calls that day because that's the part of being a founder and doing things. And I call him, and my stepdad, Whit, picks up the phone. He says, hey, and he said, is Liana with you? And I said, yes, she is. She said, and he just said, put me on speakerphone. He puts me on speakerphone. And he says, Liana, hug him because his brother died. Jonathan died in a car wreck today. A head-on car collision. There's Whit and there's me on the front row. Right, we're there. And I just turn around and look, and I tap my wife and I said, look at this place. And there was no color in there. They were just people there to celebrate. And it was, people would see a church full of half black, half white people that did not exist. And I love that part. I love that part of my identity now. But we will continue to grow out the One Oak financial brand because it is the uniqueness of our company and what differentiates us from other financial services companies around this country is unique. Now, there's some people that are really doing it great.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Mike Milligan, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and we want to talk about the amazing things you're doing with people to help them manage their finances. And then we want to talk about this really cool book that you just wrote or just had published called Be One of a Kind, or You're One of, what's the title? Your One of a Kind Financial Plan?
It's the One of a Kind Financial Plan.
The One of a Kind Financial Plan. There you go. Thanks for being here, bud.
Oh, I'm excited. I enjoyed our pre-podcast conversation. That was really engaging.
We've got to start recording those, just so you know.
I know, because if we'd have recorded that one, people would have been like, "Wow,
it's
going to be amazing." So I'm originally from North Carolina, a little small town called Laurel Hill, which is has 2 stoplights. When I grew up, it didn't have any of that. I was interesting thing about Laurel Hill, it's in a county called Scotland County in North Carolina. There are 100 counties in North Carolina and obviously 50 states. When I was going through the education system, the Department of Education ranked school systems when I was growing up, and North Carolina was the 50th ranked school system in the country, which is not good. Well, Scotland County was
you're sort of going up.
Right. Well, Scotland County was the 100th ranked county in the state. So I literally got the worst education in America. Yet here I am as an author. I have a podcast called Ideas by Mike. I am the founder of One Oak Financial, which is a coast to coast, even including Hawaii, financial services company. But I trace this all back to my roots in that little town in Laurel Hill because, I was born out of wedlock to a high school mother, high school father. My mom and my grandparents were amazing. Like my granny and my pa are 2 of my heroes. We all have a Mount Rushmore in our life. My granny and pa are like right there at the top. When I was in my early teens, around 11, my pa could not work as much as he used to. He was in construction. He owned a construction company, but he was starting to wear out in his 60s. And so when I was 11, my grannies had to start earning a living. So out of desperation, she had to innovate. The only thing she really knew how to do well was be a wife, be a mom, and cook. And so she had this little unique recipe where she would take cornmeal and fry it up and turn it into a bun. And then between that bun, she would put collard greens. It was called a collard sandwich. And the reason she made that is because we were poor. I mean, we lived in a trailer, like a single wide trailer, 12 feet wide, 60 feet long. They raised 5 kids in that trailer. Numerous grandkids were there at some point in time. But the reason she made that sandwich is because it was inexpensive to make. Well, fast forward a couple years, in my early teens, my pa got cancer, and he rapidly passed away, just rapidly. I mean, it was like he was eaten up. He didn't go to the doctor, right? Like most men, we were like, oh, it's nothing. It's, back pain or whatever. Well, he was eaten up with cancer. He passed away. Well, she had to get serious about this collard sandwich business, and nobody in our family had an entrepreneur spirit to them, or our family was not well educated. And so she would literally bring me along while she was selling sandwiches, and we would sit at her dining room table when I was 11 and 12 years old and count money at the end of the day. And we would put it in a spiral bound notebook and add up what it was, and then we would put that money, because we were not sophisticated, we'd put it in a Folgers coffee can, right? She also would wrap it in tinfoil and write liver on the outside of the tinfoil and put it in the freezer. She said, because if somebody robs me, they're never going to take the liver. It was like one of her sayings. So like she did this, like my middle school years, my high school years, I went along with her. I helped sell. We did festivals together. She would, on a festival day, she would sit in the back because she was the star. She was the cook. And we would set up and we would hustle, right? People would come and order 5, 10, 20. I would count the money, right? And then when, I got tired or somebody got tired up front, I would go up and sell. And then during the week, we would go sell them we sold collard sandwiches. That's how she lived. And I got to the point where she needed to open a bank account. And there was only one little bank down the street. It was called the First Bank. And so I would go into the bank with her. And there was a guy there wearing a suit and tie. And I just thought, man, that guy, I want to be that guy, because he was sharp dressed. And so I asked him, how do you become like a bank manager? That's all I really wanted to be in life. I wanted to play baseball, right, as long as I could. And I wanted to be a bank manager. Well, he said, you got to go to college. And nobody in my family had been to college. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And he said, well, you need to talk to this person at the high school. And so I went and talked to a guidance counselor. And Mike, I went to college, first person in my family to go to college. And I thought I thought himself, I thought it was his self, HISSELF, his self. I thought that was a real English word. Like my English professor in college was like, hey, this is not a real word. And I'm like, nobody's ever told me this. What are you talking about?
It's like these ones today. These
correct.
ones. That drives me nuts. Everybody says that now, and it's like, no, stop.
Yes.
So
My up through college, right? A small town boy who was an entrepreneur. I didn't know how to spell entrepreneur. I didn't know what an entrepreneur was, but I was an entrepreneur. And all I really wanted to do was I wanted to be an employee that wore a suit in a bank, because I thought that was the coolest thing out there. And so there I go. I go about an hour and a half away from Laurinburg to a small school called Campbell University. It's in a dry county, Harnett County, another small county in North Carolina. And I run into this guy named Jimmy, two big people there. I run into this guy named Jimmy Witherspoon, and I run into this guy named Glenn Jonas. Jimmy Witherspoon he taught trust and investment management. He was the director of the banking program, trust management. And I just fell in love with his classes. And so I'm like, that's where I'm going to go. And then this other guy, Glenn Jonas, was a religion professor. He was pretty young at the time. He was still in his 20s. He and his wife had just come to the school. And I don't know what it was about him, but he invested some time in me. right, when I was there. And he taught me how to be a man. Not like, I mean, I'm talking about it. We didn't have dinner every night, right? But he would always ask after class, how are you doing? He would say, come to my office. And, he would just say, hey, listen, you're destined and meant to do something. And I remember one time he said, hey, listen, if you really live a unique life, you can do anything you want to, because I had limiting beliefs because of where I came from. And so, I did. I graduated college. I got a master's degree. And I mean, I went and worked for a bank because that's what I wanted to do. So I worked in the banking world in corporate America for about the first 10 years of my career, and realized that's not very fun. So it just wasn't who I was.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
So we're going to back up a little if it's okay.
Okay.
What was your favorite thing about growing up there?
And, I didn't know, I look back on it now, right? And I had a great childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I was poor.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a clue I was poor. I didn't know that, I didn't know my family was poor. I didn't know that you were supposed to eat broccoli, because we didn't eat broccoli, right? I didn't know that vegetables were really supposed to be like part of a balanced diet. But the small town atmosphere that I grew up in was about family first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in our family, right, we had, so like my mom took me, remarried, and I had a brother, Jonathan, and so my mom would take us to church, right? And so, but then and so we had other parts of the family. She had it was her and 4 brothers and sisters, so there were 5 in total. But after church on Sunday, we would all go to Granny's trailer, right? And Granny would make fried chicken or fried fish and, 4 or 5 side dishes. And we would, 30 of us would crowd into that trailer or outside, and we would just live together, right? We would eat food, and we would throw a ball around, and, and all the cousins were there. It was just, we were just living, and we didn't know any different. On Friday nights, we would watch Jeopardy, right? And Wheel of Fortune with Granny and Pa. I remember being there with Hee Haw. Do you remember the show Hee Haw? Mm-hmm. We would watch Hee Haw together, and we would watch The Cosby Show. And it was I remember I was introduced to Sudoku by my pa, because he would sit there and he would do that. It was a simple life. It was and it was a good life, right? And I have so many fond memories of family time together, and being with my pa and granny, with my mom, with my aunts and uncles, Christmas time, Thanksgiving time. I just remember being there in this little small town, and the little details about the store down the street named Brock's, that, I could go along the street there where my granny lived, and I could pick up 10 bottles and walk him down there, and he'd give me 50 cents for those 10 bottles. And I could turn that 50 cents into a Coke and a moon pie. Right. I have so many fond memories of that little small town.
So I think we know the answer to this already, but growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
That it was my granny.
Yeah.
And and I don't mean to say that it's any disrespect to my mom, because my mom is a rock star. Right. I don't think, I mean, I love my mother, right? I mean, and my mom loves me, and we have a unique relationship. We don't talk every day, but man, we care about each other because we grew up together, right? She was 16, 17 years old when she had me. We grew up together.
Yeah. My mom had me when she was 19. We all grew up together. Yeah.
Right. And so, but my granny was like my rock star. And it's not like she was like Taylor Swift, right? She wasn't around the house singing. She wasn't Betty Crocker, right? She was just a stable force who would make you laugh, who would make you food, right? When you were hungry. She would, and she would just, I think her greatest gift is just that she would be there for you.
Yeah. She just loved on you.
Just loved on you. That's it. Right. And I mean, she I'd look back on it. She wasn't perfect, right? She smoked cigarettes, and every once in a while a bad word would come out of her mouth. She wasn't perfect, but boy, she was perfect for me.
Yeah. So when you were at these places, I think you said festivals, right?
Yeah.
And you were working on selling collared pies.
Yeah.
Is that what they were called? Collared pie?
Collared sandwiches, although that
Collared
does sound
sandwiches,
good.
right?
A collared pie actually does sound pretty good.
So you're selling these collared sandwiches. And you said something about when people would get tired, you'd come in and you'd come up front and sell and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that for a second? Because those are things that form you for life, those types of experiences. What was the single most important thing you learned selling at a young age?
What I learned then and then what I realized I learned then are two totally separate things. What I learned then is that I liked money a lot.
Yeah.
I liked how money felt. I liked to touch it. I liked to count it. I like to be around money. I mean,
You like to count the number of moon pies you could buy with it?
I did. I loved money.
Yeah.
What I've learned, like with wisdom, looking back on it, is that my granny was not really selling a collared sandwich.
Yeah.
She was selling love.
Yeah.
Right? She was selling comfort.
Mhm.
She was selling an experience that people could not create on their own because a collared sandwich was not a common thing in the town.
Mhm.
It only came around a couple times a year, right? You got them at this festival or one of these 3 or 4 stores. Now, what people don't know about her is that if you wanted collared sandwiches, you could call her. You know, you'd look her up in the phone book when they still had them. You would dial 462-3211. That was her phone number. You would call that number and she would just say, yeah, how many do you want? And then she would just give people her home address and they would come up, they would pick up 20, 25 of them and she'd sell them. Now, the thing about that, Mike, and this is why I love money so much, and this is what I learned back then, this is in the 80s, you could get a Big Mac for $1. Right? You could get 2 cheeseburgers at Hardee's or Carl's Jr., for $1. 2 cheeseburgers for $1. Because I used to, my pa used to take me there when he was after school and we'd go on his mail runs when he could no longer be in construction. But she was selling collared sandwiches for $5 each. When you listen, you could get a Big Mac for $1 and she was getting them for $5. And so what I realized is she was selling an experience just in the form of 2 pieces of fried cornbread and a collared sandwich. And it's like one of the things that as I have evolved from being an employee to a founder and an owner, we build financial plans. I'm not saying that we're not good at building financial plans and investment models and portfolios, but what we're selling is the
dreams.
timeline.
Yeah,
we're
building
selling
dreams. Yeah,
right. And we're encouraging people to do this, to be one of a kind before it's too late. Right. And I mean, that's like, so you asked me what I learned. I learned money when I was a kid, but I learned that she was not selling collared sandwiches.
Yeah.
She was selling an experience that people craved, that people wanted.
How invaluable was that you learned that at such an early age?
The love of money?
Just the fact that you learned how you felt about money, number one.
Oh,
but most importantly, you learned that she was selling an experience. There are people that live their entire lives, Mike, that never figure that out. Like a babysitter is not selling babysitting services. She's selling a night out where you don't have to worry about your kids.
That's right.
And you have a date night with your wife, right? Or whoever, right? You with me? That's what is being sold, not the hours that she's sitting there watching the kids. I want people to understand that distinction because literally there are people out there that have lived 80 years and they've never figured it out. They've never drawn that distinction because they never had the opportunity to, right? You were sort of thrown into this situation as a youngster, and I think it was one of the best things that ever happened to you.
I'd agree. Tony Robbins says you better learn how to use pain and pleasure or it will use you. And that's not, it's like, it's paraphrasing a quote. And so this whole idea about pain and pleasure, right? I didn't know that my family was in pain. I know that I knew my pa passed away, right? but I didn't know like the grief of it
Yeah.
that people were experiencing. But also I didn't know the pain of being poor.
Yeah.
Because they never let me in on that.
Yeah.
Right.
People
That was
suffer silently.
correct.
They don't talk about it a lot. They
Right.
don't. Right.
And there
They
was
just kind of trudge on through and they get through it and they move on.
Yeah. And there was no magic 401k back then for her to tap into. Right. She didn't work. So she didn't have 40 quarters of Social Security, right, to be able to pile into for herself. So she had to live off of like, and listen, he was a construction guy. And during that time, if you could take a job where you can get paid $2,000 in cash or $2,000 via check, you were taking the cash.
Sure you were.
And that money wasn't being reported to the IRS. And so
they didn't trust banks back then.
Right.
Great Depression, all that. They didn't trust banks. My grandfather kept a fortune, absolute fortune. Lived to be 97. He was worth a lot of money. Nobody knew it, but he was worth a lot of money. That man kept a fortune in a milk can in the cellar of his house. Down with the rats, okay? Down with the food that was canned. Down with the 2-liter bottles of Coke, okay?
Right.
That's where it was. There was pallets all over the place. There's a flipping fortune in the corner in that milk can.
Well, when you're a small business owner and you don't pay tax, that means you're also not paying into the Social Security system. So like my granny, when my pa died, my granny she had the minimum Social Security, which I saw a check one time and I was like, man, this is really cool. And I mean, I have a distinct memory of this. I was like 16 years old and her Social Security check came in because we were going to go take it out. I was like, man, this is so cool. She just got a check for $43 from nowhere. And I was like, man, that's so cool that she got free money
for the month.
I didn't realize that was she only got it once a month
for the month. Yeah.
For the month. Yeah. And I mean, I was like, and we were poor. And so we got cheese. We got the block cheese that you had to go to the community center to get.
Government cheese is what we call it.
Government cheese.
Yeah.
That's right.
Government butter.
And so, I mean, I can look back on those times and say now, I mean, I'm in a way different situation than I was as a kid, but a lot of that is because I've had some good people along the way and a lot of experience that have kind of shaped me. My wife and I say all the time that we were one bad decision from having tattoos and being in a jail, right? Because I mean, she grew up on a farm, right, in rural Virginia, and her story is unique too because she was sheltered and she was loved, right? But it was not a worldly. It was not she didn't grow up in this world. She grew up in that world. And that world was, 19, it was 1200s, 1100s. That's because they were still living that way. But we were one decision away from having a totally different life.
Yeah.
But now here I am 49 years old. I can look back on what happened to me 38 years ago, 36 years ago, 35 years ago. And I'm able to build a pretty dynamic company, write a really good book, do some really great things, like be able to, have a conversation with you, Mike, that I never would have thought was possible.
Yeah.
Right. 30 years ago.
Yeah. And, another thing that Tony talks about is how grateful he was for how he was raised. He had a rough childhood. But he was grateful to his mother for raising him the way she did because she turned him into the man he is today. And that sounds like that's what happened with you. Yeah. Not in the way, not in that way, but in terms of those formative years and when you were growing up, the things you learned were absolutely invaluable. Absolutely invaluable. So you mentioned that you played baseball and you liked playing it. Yeah. What position did you play?
So I was a catcher. Baseball has a unique part of my story also. My father, when I was born, right, my father, who was in high school, was a baseball player. His dad, they were from a different side of the railroad tracks than what my family was. And my dad actually, and my granddad actually had his name on the high school baseball field. So the baseball name was named after him. And I played high school baseball there in Scotland High School. We were they were good for a lot of years, but the
Mhm.
last time they were really good was back in the 70s, back
Right.
when you know, back when I was born, right? That's when they were good. Well, here I come up to the high school ranks and, man, I could throw a baseball really good and I could hit a baseball really far. I could not run. I was as slow as a Sunday driver, right? I could turn doubles into singles every day, right? And so when I was in high school, we were in the state semifinals, or I think it was state quarterfinals, and I don't know. My speed was a real detriment, but again, I could hit a baseball.
Mm.
And so I'd gotten into a little bit of slump over 2 weeks. I batted like maybe 470 my senior year. And I mean I had a lot of singles,
Mhm.
right? And I think I actually did have a double one time against Pinecrest High School. I remember it. I mean, I basically hit it like 390 feet and almost got thrown out at second. But here I am, and we're in the quarterfinals, and Coach Britt, who was our high school coach, started Perry Thurman as DH that day.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting, right? Because he's like, and he just said, Mikey, they called me Mikey at the time.
Mhm.
Mikey, I see a matchup here, and I just want you to pay attention to what's going on today. Because I was pretty smart, I was pretty intuitive, and so sure enough, I just pay attention on the bench, and he comes over to me about the fourth, and he said, "Are you noticing anything?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." I'm noticing that the pitcher is throwing fastball, curveball, fastball, curveball, fastball. And he said, "Yeah." He's like, I've told our hitters that, and the score was 2-2 at the time." And he's like, but the pitcher, by the way, was throwing like 96. I mean, he
Mhm.
was really bringing it. And so, sure enough, I got in there, and he's like, "Hey, listen, I want you to go hit for Perry." And so I did, and pitcher got a little wild. So there were two runners on base, and throws a fastball, first pitch, throws a curveball. And then I was like, all right, fastball's coming. And I just like,
Mhm.
in my head, I'm like, I just got to get ahead of it. And the
Mhm.
summer before, we had this college coach come in, and his name was Coach Paget. He drove like a Comet. If you remember the Comet
Mhm.
cars, he was a
Mhm.
wild man. He coached the college years, but he taught us about this thing called backspin. Like when you hit a baseball a certain way, it creates like backspin and it will just take off and go. And
Mhm.
I'd never been taught that before, but I was taught it. And I had not actually in practices, I was elevating balls left and right, but I'd never really elevated. I was still hitting line drives. This kid threw a 96-mile-an-hour fastball in the inner half. I don't ever remember it touching the bat.
Mhm.
I mean, it was just like, it was the most beautiful feeling I ever had in my
It's
life.
pure. It's absolutely pure.
And I hit that ball. They said it went like 450 feet, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't see it land, but it went into the cornfield behind, the scoreboard.
Mhm.
And there I am trotting around the bases, going as slow as ever. And they've got the Larmer Exchange has pictures of me with the biggest smile on my face. And I come around third base, and Coach Britt said, he just said, "That a man." That's all he said. And I remember like as clear as day. And like we kept going. We ended up finishing state runner up. I hit a couple more home runs in the state because all of a sudden that they just clicked, right?
Mhm.
So then I had a chance to play in college for a while, but then I got into coaching, and I coached high school baseball for 14 years.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and it was and now that I always coach. It's always like when I was coaching varsity baseball as the head coach. It's like I always had the JV team. Now we were playing varsity against varsity, right?
Mhm.
But it's like I always had the JV team, and all the other teams we were playing were like the varsity teams, right? So they had the best 9 players out there, and some of their bench players were always better than our starters.
Mhm.
But somehow won 240 games as a high school baseball coach, won a conference championship at a school that had won a conference championship in 30 years, made it to the state tournament 6 straight years, and have a lot of great kids who still to this day, when I see them in Norfolk, they still call me coach
Mhm.
10 years later. And that whole relationship about being a coach,
Mhm.
right? So, I'm a founder of a major company. I'm obviously a student just of life,
Mhm.
right? I learned that from, my experience and then like just watching life happen.
Mhm.
But like just that whole thing that those titles people give you in life. And that like I was just at a restaurant the other day and this kid, Thomas Fox, comes up to me and he's 27 years old now, just turned 27. He said, "Hey coach." And it's like, I mean, I'll see Zach Groves around, coach, right? And it's just that's an amazing feeling that baseball gave me, right? That is that I never would have had that, from a competition standpoint anywhere else.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. Do me a favor, hold up that book for a second. It's called The One of a Kind Financial Plan. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that book and we're going to talk about the person that it's dedicated to. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. We're back with Mike Milligan, and we were talking about you as a baseball coach and basically how you grew up and what you learned growing up, and specifically what your grandma taught you, which I think is just absolutely invaluable. So after high school, you go to college at Campbell University. Actually, let me ask you this first, because this is something that's been, so where's Laurel Hill in North Carolina related to major cities?
I mean, the closest big city is Fayetteville, North Carolina, home to like the paratroopers in the Army.
Okay.
And then it's about 95 miles south of like Raleigh, Chapel Hill. Laurel Hill is right on the North Carolina, South Carolina border. And if you look at the state, like if you know like the outline of the state, all of a sudden, North Carolina just takes like the border of North Carolina, South Carolina takes this 45-degree turn down to the coast.
Yeah.
At the top of that turn, that's Laurel Hill.
Gotcha. Okay. That's cool. I'd never heard of the town before. Just trying to get a feel for where it was geographically. So after high school, you make the decision. Well, actually, let me ask you this. What was did you have a favorite subject in high school?
Math. It was, I mean, numbers. I always loved what you could do with numbers. Again, I didn't speak great English, right? Like I'm actually learning Spanish right now, which is ironic because I don't even speak English that well.
Yeah.
But English was not my best subject by any stretch. I didn't really like science, but math, it was always about numbers. It was just something about that which intrigued me.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
Actually, it was a history teacher.
Yeah.
So I actually have two favorite teachers. One was a history teacher. His name was Coach Willard. He coached baseball, but he really didn't coach baseball while I was there. He helped a little bit, but he taught economics. So in 9th and 10th grade, he would teach economics. And I remember him teaching like he taught us the lesson, like if you have a hot dog every day, the first day it's good, the second day you'll probably like it, the third day it's good, the fourth day is better. But he taught us the law of diminished utility, right? The more you have something, the more you consume something, the less value it has to you. He taught us like about Socrates and a lot of just thought leaders and like different theory about that. And I remember him teaching us about the Federalist Papers. And, I got very fascinated by Alexander Hamilton. So math, and the reason I got fascinated by Alexander Hamilton is because he was the first Treasury guy. And so this was all before even Hamilton the play out. But I read his, I read his all the Federalist Papers. I was actually in college. I was a history minor, and so I did that by taking all U.S. history classes that were basically between the founding 1776 and through the Civil War. Yeah. There were like 6 of those classes, and I took them all. I could not, I could not consume enough of history, the early history of the United States.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I'm actually in a history class right now, college history class, believe it or not. I'll tell you that story later. But so you make the decision to go to Campbell University. Number one, why Campbell? And how difficult was it for you to get into college?
Ironically, I went to Campbell because of money.
Okay.
I got accepted into like the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I actually didn't get into Wake Forest. That was another school I wanted to get to. I got into a school in Kentucky called Center College, and it was a beautiful college. It was just over the mountains, and I got sick driving over mountains. And then I got a couple other schools, but it really just came down to money because, you know, the rule of money in my house is my family didn't have it and I needed it.
Yeah.
And so I literally could go to Campbell with no cost to my family. Now my sophomore, junior, senior year, my mother did sacrifice a lot because I wanted to move off campus. I didn't want to stay in. So they helped me with rent, right, to be able to stay off campus. But like the education part, I funded with grants, scholarships, and I had a pretty big student loan bill when I left college.
What was your major?
It was trust and investment management, and I got a bachelor's and a master's at the same time in an accelerated program. So I got a bachelor's and master's in a combined 5 years versus 6 years.
Wow, awesome, good job. What made you decide to do the master's?
Witherspoon. So like I had two professors at Campbell. Witherspoon was in the trust world, and he said, listen, it would do you. He's like, he told us all, everybody that was in the trust program, he said, in the future, you're going to want a master's degree. And you're going to have to do it like when you're a mom or a dad, or you're working full time. And he's like, I'll tell you, the best time to do it is just do it now. Just one more year of school and you would do it now. And about half of us took him up on that. And we still stay in contact. Matter of fact, I talked to yesterday. I talked to Mary Lynch, who is a trust degree major. She's the head of trust at Park National Bank in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I still stay in contact with people I was in college with who did that 5-year program.
Do you ever make it back to North Carolina much?
Well, my mom is still there. So my mom and stepdad are there, and so
is she in Laurel Hill?
Yeah, she spends half her time between Laurel Hill or Laurinburg now, which is the town next door, and then Sunset Beach, because they have a beach place also. So they do about half and half.
So if you ever make it to like Charlotte or Wilmington, if you like breakfast, I'm a breakfast nut. Like I could have breakfast three meals a day.
Yeah,
actually more than 3 meals a day. Right. Yeah. There's a place called Vicious Biscuit.
Okay.
The founder and co-founder have been on the program.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have both of their life stories. These guys are amazing. And the food, oh my goodness. I was in Wilmington on business a couple years ago, and year before last. And I ate at Vicious Biscuit 3 days in a row.
Right.
I think I'm technically completely addicted. But it's absolutely incredible. So if you ever get a chance, I love Eggs Benedict.
Yeah.
And they have a thing called a Vicious Benny. That's a Vicious Biscuit, open-faced.
Yeah.
2 slabs of ham, egg, smothered in this to die for hollandaise sauce. It is, oh my goodness, amazing. So if you ever get a chance. Yeah. So, and they aren't a sponsor of this or anything. I just love
it. Well, this segment,
this food
this
is
segment
just,
of the show.
It's
this segment of the show is brought to you by
absolutely incredible. And it was an amazing story that they have too. The guy that started it actually wanted to start a food truck, and he went out to a local restaurant owner who's kind of a legend back there.
Right.
George McLaughlin's his name. Went to George and he said, I want to cook for you. I want you to invest in a food truck. I want to do the cooking. I want you to invest in a food truck with me. And so he goes and gets a friend of his who's the co-founder of Vicious Biscuit that used to work for him, and they go sit, and this guy cooks for him, and they're eating his food. And they're like, no. This is a restaurant. In fact, this is a series of restaurants. This is going to be franchising. This is right. They just launched their first franchise, opened their first franchise last year.
Wow.
So it's amazing, absolutely amazing. So after college, So you bachelor's, master's degree, right after college. Where do you go to work?
So I started out at a regional bank called BB&T, Branch Banking and Trust.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're now Truist, and Witherspoon helped me. I got married in college. I got married my junior year of college. Had my first son Zach when I was still in college. Generational curse type thing, right? We all had babies when we were young, right? And so had Zach, and I've got 3 kids now. Zach, Grayson, Paige. They're absolutely great. Zach's married to Haley. We have a son, a grandson named Daniel. Family is absolutely fantastic. But I start working at Branch Banking and Trust, BB&T. BB&T had just gone through a merger with Southern National, and they were in acquisition mode. They had started acquiring other banks. And so I went through a 9-month program with them called the Management Development Program. I asked to go to Norfolk, Virginia, where I've really spent most of my adulthood since then. And I show up in Norfolk, Virginia in March of 2000. So right after Y2K. And BB&T had bought a bank here called Commerce Bank. Well, during that time, Commerce Bank was led by a CEO, a really innovative CEO and a great banker who in the negotiations of selling to BB&T, somewhere they missed like a non-compete clause or something. And so he walks out and forms another bank locally called Town Bank. And his formation was happening as soon as I came up here.
Wow.
And so I got to kind of accelerate a couple steps because a lot of people left here quickly, but I got to accelerate pretty quick. And by the time, so I was with BB&T for 3 years, and then Wachovia, if you remember
I heard Wachovia, yeah.
Wachovia recruited me to come over and be a private banker at the age of 25, which was unheard of. I followed a gentleman named Rusty Bailey, who was a great private banker, but he had left Wachovia to go start like a commercial insurance business because he wanted to earn more money than the bank was paying. But he had a great book of business. Ironically, later when I was coaching baseball, I coached Rusty's son Davis in high school. But Rusty did a great job in relationships. So I like stepped in. It was like my first break of being handed something in life. And I just worked. I did like what I did when we were selling college sandwiches. And I just worked. I worked his book of business. And I ended up like my 2 of my 3 years there as the top private banker in their whole system. So Pennsylvania to Florida, out to Tennessee, I was the top private banker at the age of 25 and 26. And I didn't know what in the world I was doing, to be honest with you. But, again, retrospect, looking back at that time, what I saw by working there is I saw that banks, BB&T and Wachovia, when I think about like how my week was scheduled, my week was scheduled like a Monday morning sales meeting where the whole team got together and talked about who you were meeting with that week and then what deals you were working on. And then whenever you worked on a deal, you always put like the profit model together. Like how much would this client profit the bank? Not is this best for the client? And I remember a client there at the time, a guy by the name of Ray, who had retired in 1999 from just a job. He was 60 when he retired. Luckily had like $1 million saved in an IRA. And he also had about $600,000 saved in CDs. And you've been around long enough, Mike. In 1990, when you had a CD, a 5-year CD, you were earning 8% on your money. And so he fortunately needed $80,000 to live. And so he got half of that money from the interest and the other half from his portfolio. Because remember, banks, investment companies back then, and still to this day for some part, said that you could take 4% of your account and never run out of money.
Yeah.
So he had $1 million. He was taking 4% from his portfolio. And here he is sitting in my office in 2002. And he said, Mike, you seem like a pretty smart guy. You got some common sense. He said, if your manager has said I can take 4% out and that the market returns 8 to 10% per year and me paying a 1% fee is worth that. He's like, well, if that's the case, why in 2 years, taking $40,000 out of year is my portfolio worth $650,000? when it's supposed to earn 8 to 10% a year. Well, if you remember back to what was happening in the stock market back then, well, Y2K hit, right? The tech bubble burst.
9/11.
9/11. And then Enron failed. And so we had negative returns 2000, 2001, 2002, yet big banks, investment companies, houses were still saying you get 8 to 10% return annually and you could take 4% out. What they were missing was sequence of return risk, right? And they were basically taking money out when the markets were down. Right. Flawed strategy, right? And then we had the loss.
Because it's even more expensive to take that money out.
Correct. Yeah. Because you're locking in a loss.
Correct.
And then we just had the lost decade, right? Because then we had the financial crisis. So I ran through. I left in 2004 from Wachovia, and I started a private bank with a local startup company, right? And I worked in that division for 3 years until I had an exit. And then here I am in 2008. So about 10 years in the business. And I had been employee with an exit, right? A pretty big payday, right? At the time, a really high 6-figure payday when I'm 30 years old, 31 years old. And I'm thinking, wow, I should start something of my own. And then I started in the insurance business. So I started at MetLife and then absorbed a division into Ohio National, which both great companies. They were mutual companies. MetLife turned into a stock company. And then in 2012, I'm like, man, this independent thing had started taking shape, right? And I'm like, I think I want to build a business. And I knew nothing about building a business, but I had money in the bank, right? I had some trophies where I was the top person. Where I was like, I can do this. I could hire some staff, right? And Mike, I failed. I failed miserably. Now, I mean, I made money, but I failed as a leader. I was failing in my relationship at home. I was failing as being a dad. I mean, my kids look at me and say now, you were a good dad. But again, they didn't know they didn't know a difference, right, between a good and a bad dad. I look back on it now and think, man, I could have been more present.
Yeah.
Right. And I learned, like, from 2012 to 2017 that although I was making money, money was going into a savings account, bills were getting paid. I was like, man, I'm going to die. Like, I thought I'm going to die. Like, I'm working so much. And so I actually sold that business. I had my second exit. I sold that business to a small regional bank, and I became an employee again for 3 years. Right. And because I was good at bringing business in. And then we moved forward to like 2019. Yeah.
Was it difficult selling that business and becoming an employee after owning your own business?
I didn't have an option. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I was either going to die or go bankrupt. One of the two. And I mean, it just, like, when people sell a business, that's the one thing that's probably one of the great things I did during that period of my life, because I realized what was going to happen. I'd gotten up to 350 pounds. I was eating very unhealthy. I saw what was happening with clients. I could not service all the clients I had.
What year was this?
This was 2017.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I just realized that I could not do everything, right?
Yeah.
And I was trying to do everything. And I was trying to do it with like $10 an hour employees, part-time. I was just not acting professional. And so, but I exited. And again, I exited with a 6-figure payout, right? So here I am. Now I just turned, so in 2017, I just turned 41. I've had 2 6-figure exits from businesses, right? From starting of a private bank and that was sold to a publicly traded company, selling a business that was failing, right? And I mean, I guess that's the sign of a good salesperson if you could sell a failing business, right? But the company that bought it, they knew what the value was. The value was me. It wasn't really the clients. It was me, right? Because again, publicly traded companies are all about profit.
Yeah.
And they knew that if they brought me, all of those clients would come and they could get them in their ecosystem and they would sell them other things. And so they were about profit. And so I had a 3-year go with them. During that time, I started doing a little bit of coaching, got involved with some other things that were out there on the entrepreneur side, did some real estate. And then here comes 2020. And my 3 years was up. And boy, it was February. And I'm like, let's do this. I was ready to go. And so I go to a conference in Nashville, and then all of a sudden everybody starts coughing. Everybody gets sick around you. And I get a mic and a camera. And I had done Skype meetings before because in Norfolk, Virginia, people move here for the military and then they move somewhere else. And I had those clients all over the place. So February, COVID shuts down. I get a mic and a camera and I set it up. And I'm like, all right, I got to, I'm just going to, whoever wants a meeting, I'm just going to put it out there. And I started putting it on Facebook. Are you worried about your money? Are you worried about your money? And I was just doing, and all of a sudden I was getting meetings in Colorado and California and Wisconsin. And my calendar was full. And here I am starting over, right? And I was like, man, what am I going to call this thing? And I'm like, man, this is a really good idea. So I called it Ideas by Mike because I wanted to be different. So I started Ideas by Mike. I created a podcast called Ideas by Mike. I hired Caitlin to be my operations manager. I had Kelsey to be my lead generation person. And the two of us, we took off and we went from 0 to $1.2 million of revenue in, 18 months.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this different. Right. This is not going to be about me. Right. This is going to be about something bigger than me. And then I started down this path of one of a kind. It all came together because in July of 2022, I mean, you know where the story's heading, but in July of 2022, my wife and I are sitting on the beach, just enjoying a Friday afternoon. Like I was experiencing life. I was being one of a kind. I got out of the office. I went to the beach. We stopped at Chipotle. I mean, I remember every detail of this July Friday, right? Because we're sitting on the beach. We have our Chipotle. I'm on a phone call with Betty, who's a lead in Maryland. We're talking and she's telling me her story and I'm finding out the why of, why money's so important to her. And my mom calls. And it was weird because my mom wouldn't call. My mom generally doesn't call during my work day because she knows I'm working. And so I'm on the phone with her. My mom calls again. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I get off the phone with Betty. I was from the beach, right? I was going to take 3 or 4 more calls that day because that's the part of being a founder and doing things. And I call him, and my stepdad, Whit, picks up the phone. He says, hey. And he said, is Liana with you? And I said, yes, she is. She said, and he just said, put me on speakerphone. He puts me on speakerphone. And he says, Liana, hug him because his brother died. Jonathan died in a car wreck today. A head-on car collision. It just happened. He died instantaneous. And Mike, my world just like, whew. I mean, he was my brother, right?
Yeah.
And he had been through a lot of ups and downs in his life. Like I said earlier, when we were talking, my brother and I were vastly different. I was academic. I wanted to run a business. My brother was outdoorsy guy. He wanted to go hunting. He wanted to ride dirt bikes. He loved life. He played the drums in church.
He owned a lowrider.
He had a lowrider truck, right? And so, but by the way, with neon lights around it. It was
yeah. Well, you got to have the lights. Come on.
Right. But, he had evolved in life and he had become this man that was, again, he wasn't out pursuing academic achievement. He wasn't even trying to get like big net worths. He wanted to connect with people. And so the last couple of years of his life, he and his wife, Melissa, my sister-in-law, had just developed this beautiful relationship that they struggled together because they grew up together. They got married early at their wedding on the, the processional, right? There's always normally a song that's sung there, but there was the song from the song from Shrek, When I Saw Her Face, Now I'm a Believer, type of thing. And it was so fun, right? I remember that day like it was just, but this Friday, he passed away. And I remember like driving the 5 hours to see my mom, right? And I remember like we didn't stop, right? We picked up like one outfit from our house. We got our dog in one outfit and we went, and Liana drove the whole way. We didn't stop. And I remember getting there and we walk in the door and Whit, my stepfather, just grabs Liana and says, let's go outside. And my mom just sat there and we cried. I mean, we cried big tears. And then we went over the next day, like we went over and saw my sister, Melissa, and she was crying, right? And I just walked in and I did not leave that couch for 2.5 hours. And all she did was she cried for 2.5 hours. And my brother had made an impact in 41 years. That was just has become legendary in that small town, because what he did, he's a white guy. He's like me, right? We look alike. But in the last couple of years, he pulled propane for a propane tank for like trailers, mobile homes that were heated with propane tanks. But he wanted to connect with people. He loved to talk. He wanted to share stories. He wanted to connect. So my brother grew dreadlocks. Like, a white guy with dreadlocks. It was an instant story, right? It diffused any situation. And, I have my view of why he did that. And my view is he just wanted to connect with people to, share his faith.
Mhm.
That's what I really believe he wanted to do. And I got a glimpse of that at his funeral. So like the day of his funeral, I go in about an hour before everybody shows up, because we went down right away after it happened, but we had to come back because one of my daughters, Grace, she was in Costa Rica, and she was with her college soccer team, University of Lynchburg, and they were doing a missions trip down there, and she was flying. We got permission for her to fly back to DC. She grabbed her car. She met us in Emporia, which is like down the interstate. Caitlin from my office went out, got her car, brought it back, and then we drove Grace down. And so we're driving down the day of the funeral. We had to get Grace clothes and all that stuff. And so we're driving down the funeral. And I said, hey, guys, I just want to stop into the church before we go get dressed. And they're like, okay. And so I said, if you don't mind, I just want to go in. So I go into the funeral, right? And there's nobody there, maybe like a sound technician setting up, but they've got it set up beautifully in there. And my brother's laying there in the casket. And I just remember I just needed to talk to him. And I went in there and I said, and I mean, he was in a head-on car collision and they did an amazing job, but there he was with his dreadlocks. And I just remember looking at him and I was thinking about like our childhood of like riding bikes together and like, being at my granny's house and, just the struggle, right? That I now knew that we had as kids growing up that he never knew we had. And then the struggles he had as an adult to become a man. And I was just like, man. And I was like, you hit your peak. And I'm looking at him like, dude, you are one of a kind. And I never really understood what one of a kind or being unique was. Well, listen, my life saying at that time was never miss a moment.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be present. I was always accused of celebrating the smallest things in life. My kids, my wife, everybody always says you will celebrate anything. And it's true, I would. Like I come home and I have a good day at work and I'm like, let's go out and celebrate, right? Let's go have dessert, right? Let's go have ice cream. Life to me is worth celebrating.
Mhm.
But then when I saw him laying there and I was like, you're one of a kind. What makes life worth celebrating is the uniqueness
Mhm.
that we have. And at his funeral, they had this holographic picture of him wearing a shirt and a bandana and his dreadlocks. And up on the screen, it said, ask me about him. And that's all my brother wanted in life, is he wanted people to ask my brother, ask me about him. And the him for him was Jesus Christ,
Mhm.
right? The him was not my brother. It was not his dreadlocks. It was about ask me because I want to invite you to church. And we grew up in this little small town. We talked about the small town I grew up in earlier. Still some bruises and some scars from the civil rights movement there, because we were a small Southern town. Even when this happened, right? 40 years after the civil rights, still bruises and scars. But I'm in the funeral, right? And there's Melissa and Gabe and Bella, and there's my mom, and there's Whit, and there's me on the front row, right? We're there. And I just turn around and look, and I tap my wife and I said, look at this place. And there was no color in there. They were just people there to celebrate. And people would see a church full of half black, half white people that did not exist in this town. It was not a thing, but it existed because people asked my brother about him. And my brother lived with purpose. He had purpose. And for 41 years old, he lived a one-of-a-kind life. And so when I left there, never miss a moment. I left his funeral, never miss a moment. And I realized what my calling in life is to be. I feel like I'm a really good financial planner.
Mhm.
But if I'm going to be a one-of-a-kind financial planner, I got to do something different. I got to be different than Wall Street and different than all these other places. But I want to be different like my brother was, right? I don't want to fit in. I don't want to be part of the traditional mold. I want to help people who don't have a voice.
Is there
right?
anybody that you've talked to that has a different take on why he grew dreadlocks?
My brother had gone through a lot in his life where he had shaved head, he'd bleached his hair. My sister-in-law hated it, to be honest with you. I mean, she laughed, she smiled, but she hated it because of the care that it required and the care he wasn't able to give it because he didn't understood it. He was his personality was out there. And so the people closest to him knew that it's just who he was, his uniqueness. There were many people at the funeral, people who spoke, a couple pastors who drew the comparison of like dreadlocks being of mirroring who he was serving, right? I don't know that they would say he did it exclusively for that. They would do it because he's an individual. He's one of a kind. But I mean, there were people who hated it, right? I mean, there really were people like my nephew was not a huge fan of it because it was like his dad was different. And remember, he was a high schooler at the time, right? And what high schooler kids don't want their parents to be is different. Right. They want them to be, they wanted to blend in the background, but
they want them to be parked down the street.
Right. And so he didn't necessarily.
They want to walk to school, right? Because dad's an embarrassment or mom's right. Yeah.
No, but man, my sister-in-law, here we are now. We're not quite 4 years past it, but we're getting closer to it. She's devoted to him, right? And I see it in her love, right? How she lives out loud that she's still married, right? That she's got this eternal bond with my brother. And I see it in my nephew, man. When you look and see people, right, man, that is that person's kid. Gabe is my brother's son. I mean, they have some personality differences slightly, but they're not big. And Gabe would not like me saying that. But Gabe at his age is a lot like my brother was, right at that age. Hopes and dreams and aspirations, and wanted to try a lot of different stuff, but deeply devoted to family. So my brother pushed that down to his kids, but he was unique. He was one of a kind.
So how long ago did you write the book, and what compelled you to do it?
So a labor of love, right? Because in building out Ideas by Mike, the financial firm, we had built out a unique, one of a kind financial planning process. But one of the things that I'm not good at is I'm a good storyteller, but I'm not a good writer. But what I started doing is we started putting the stories with the process, the one of a kind process with the story. And we're just like, this is pretty cool. And we started operating it within our organization. So we have 21 people in our company. And so we started operating the one of a kind financial plan. And our motto is actually, we will build a one of a kind financial plan for your one of a kind life.
Yeah.
And if you take out the one of a kind in there, so the one of a kind financial plan for your one of a kind life, if you take out the one of a kind in both of those, that it's just simply the financial plan for your life. And so we built these, but then it was like this whole idea of, man, we got to put this on paper somehow. And then we got to tell the stories of how it's impacted people. And so, we build the book, and I think we probably could come back and spend a whole episode just on the book.
We will.
and the book in and of itself weaves like the why you are unique and one of a kind with the process that's different than what Wall Street and investment managers want you to do. And then it weaves stories about people who've used it then it leads you through a process to where you can build a vision for your retirement that's uniquely yours.
Yeah.
And then you can literally take this book and you could build a financial plan for yourself. And like, that's what I wanted is right. Because people don't all need a financial planner in their life. Everybody doesn't need that. Some people have the desire and the fortitude, like their vision for their life is to manage their own money, right? But they just need some guideposts and some steps to kind of get you there. They realize like taxes are the most important, or the biggest expenditure we're going to have. And retirement income is more important than, so retirement income, the return of your money is more important than the return on your money when you retire. So that's why income is so important. Then the investment side is there are literally hundreds of thousands of investment options now. 50 years ago, there was maybe 1,000, right? Now there's hundreds of thousands, millions of investment opportunities out there. And so when you put the plan down in the paper in a book form, you can follow it.
So I totally get what you're saying about taxes, because I'm constantly having this conversation where people want to have enough in the way of like depreciation from rental real estate, that kind of thing, right? To where they can offset their income. So in the first Trump administration, Jared Kushner, who is the son-in-law of Donald Trump, married to Ivanka. It's Ivanka, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. But he was excoriated by the mainstream media because his family hadn't paid taxes in decades.
Right.
Well, that just makes them smart, right? Because they realize that taxes were the single biggest expense they were going to have. Same thing's true. Like years ago, I had a 70-year-old man walk in to my office, my real estate office that I owned. And I happened to be there and they came and got me, right? Because he just walked in off the street. So they came and got me, and I went out front and met him. And he said to me, he said, I want to buy this duplex that just went up for sale, that my son's in the other unit. So the duplex itself, the 2 units, came up for sale. He said, I want to buy it and I want to pay cash for it, and I'll pay full price. I want to give it to my son and let my son earn the rental income from it while he's going to school down here in San Diego. Great. And he said, he turned to his wife and he said, hey, go out to the car and get my tax return from last year. And she said to him, she said, honey, you don't need to show him your tax return if you're paying cash. And I said to him, I said, sir, I don't have to see your tax return. He goes, no, I just have something I want to show him. Go get it. So he showed me his Schedule E. Okay. Guy made $700,000 a year tax-free. Tax-free. He was a doctor. Okay. But do you know where the $700,000 came from? He hadn't practiced medicine in 20 years. The $700,000 came from rental income from his real estate, and the depreciation that he had completely offset it. So he paid absolutely nothing in taxes.
Those are, I mean, like Mike, those are the strategies people just don't know exist. I mean, there's there's all kind of tax strategies out there. And, I just did a podcast recently on how like the rich use the tax system different than how the everyday people do. So like you could take a passive tax approach and you're going to end up way overpaying taxes. Yeah.
So Dr. Arthur Laffer, who was the chairman of the national, oh my goodness, the Economic Council, in the White House, in the Reagan White House. Anyway, Arthur Laffer, I'm losing the term of anyway, he ran that team in the White House, the economic team. Anyway, he wrote a book recently called Taxes Have Consequences. And I interviewed his partner who co-wrote it with him on my podcast. And what's interesting is when you raise taxes anywhere you go, if you raise taxes, the wealthy figure out a way to either earn less money or move somewhere else.
Right.
It's statistically a fact, like literally statistically a fact. And he proves it in the book. So you mentioned earlier before we hit record that if somebody lived in Virginia and paid the top income tax bracket in Virginia, how much was that of their income?
It's 5.25, right? It's almost 6% when you add like in a couple of like non things you can't deduct.
And then federal on top of that is another 37, right?
Yeah.
So you're in the 40 some, like 43, 44 range?
Correct.
Okay. You also mentioned that if somebody moved to Puerto Rico and lived in Puerto Rico, their tax rate was what again?
It's 2. There's a tax code. There's a tax code in Puerto Rico. Tax code in Puerto Rico called Act 60.
Yeah.
Where if you import money, like you're a business owner and you import money in there, I mean, you have to do bona fide work and the money has to come from the mainland.
Right.
Remember, Puerto Rico is still the United States. Right?
Yeah.
It's just a territory, but it's the
Right.
United States. Dollar currency. Everybody there speaks English, right? They'll tell you they don't.
English-ish.
English-ish. And then if you really try to speak Spanish, so they really like you. But you have to live there one day more than you live in the United States.
Yeah.
You have to have a closer connection to them than you do the United States.
Yeah.
So like, for instance, if you go to a gym, you need to have your gym membership in Puerto Rico. If you go to church, you need to go there. If you give charitably, give more in Puerto Rico than you do there. Spend holidays or big events in Puerto Rico. Have family come visit you. Closer connection than the United States. And if you feel those requirements, right, become a resident, buy real estate within 2 years, import the money, have a closer connection. Well, you could save between state and federal. You save 41% tax.
That is just unbelievable.
And the only reason I know that, Mike, as well as I know it, is because my wife and I are doing it. We are Act 60 residents, and we're doing it for 3 reasons, right? Taxes are a big one.
Yeah.
But the other thing is my wife is half Puerto Rican. Like her mom grew up on the island. She was born on the island. Her grandparents grew up there. She wants to be in the culture, and we want to give back to the culture because the island has been
devastated.
It has been devastated.
Yeah.
But it's also been abused for
years.
It
was poor before, right?
Yeah.
And then a couple of these hurricanes hit, and it's just like, wow. I mean, unbelievable.
It goes back hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
But because before they were an American territory, they were a Spanish territory.
Yeah.
It's Puerto Rico, really, it means rich port.
Mm-hmm.
Puerto Rico, rich port. And there's a lot of natural beauty, a lot of not a rich thing, but the people there have been oppressed. Mm-hmm. And like, we want to get down there and we want to make that. And the third thing is we want to learn Spanish. My wife wants to learn it to reconnect, right, with the island more. I want to learn it for like mental clarity. Because, as you get older, right, you got to challenge your mind a little bit.
Sure.
But I will tell you, Espanol is muy difícil.
Mm-hmm.
It is not easy.
Yeah.
And I struggle with it.
Yeah. No, it really is. It really is. It's easier for some people than it is for others, but it really is a challenge.
Yes.
So can you talk for a second about, so you write this book dedicated to your brother, right?
Yeah.
Labor of love, the whole thing. Since you wrote the book and you started distributing it, what's been your favorite thing about the response that you received?
Oh my gosh. The biggest thing is just how people think I'm all of a sudden smarter because I wrote a book, right? I'm not smarter. I just put down my life story on paper. But like there's been people who have read it, they've seen like little snippets and they see their life in the stories.
Yeah.
And they're like, I need this. And so I'm seeing that over and over. We have a pipeline of books coming. There's 4 in total. The last one we're going to write is I'm going to write my grandparents' story, the Walter and Elizabeth Calder, because I think their story needs to be told.
Yeah.
And I'm going to write their story. I'm hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years that will be finished. I've already started it, but I want to tell their story about the legacy they gave me.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important.
It is very important. It's really formative in terms of your life and a lot of the success that you've had. Right. I mean, you can look back now that I know your story, you can look back and a lot of what you've accomplished has come from that. It's come from the value of money. It's come from your attraction to it. It's come from your ability to sell. It's come from all the different things that happened in your childhood that threw you into a situation. They didn't really ask you if you wanted to help. They just kind of said, here you go. Right. That's a big deal.
Right.
Because it tests you. Right. I grew up on a farm in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time that it absolutely ruined me.
Right.
For the rest of my life. Because the work I did there was so difficult and so arduous and so hard that everything else I've done since then feels like I'm playing hooky.
Right.
Right. Like I'm out, like I'm, somewhere I'm not supposed to be kind of thing. Right. This can't be this easy. Right. So that's the perspective that you received, I believe, growing up where you grew up. And I really believe that it was invaluable in terms of your life and where you are now. So,
agree.
quick question for you. What does tomorrow look like for you? I mean, obviously Puerto Rico, right? But what does tomorrow look like for you?
So we will, my wife and I will continue to live half on the island, invest our time and our efforts down there. I'll continue being a father to my 3 kids. I love those. Being an adult father is different than being a father of adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
I love that part. I love that part of my identity now. But we will continue to grow out the One Oak financial brand because it is the uniqueness of our company and what differentiates us from other financial services companies around this country is unique. Now, there's some people that are really doing it great. Mike, I'm not going to tell you that they're not, but it's few and far between.
Yeah.
Right. The amount of financial education and coaching and planning that is needed in the United States for people that are retiring right now, it is a huge burden. It's a huge mountain to overcome. And there's very few people doing it. Because remember, at the end of the day, Wall Street, banks, insurance companies are in the profit business.
Yeah.
And they have to report to shareholders, to senior managers, and to a board of directors. And every year they have to make more money next year than they did this year. And that they don't. So in essence, when they say they have your best interest in mind, your interest is secondary to their profits.
Guaranteed.
And in our world, we are not a profit first. Now we make a profit, right? Don't get me wrong. We are a profit company, but we're not profit first. We're a people first. And then we do profit with purpose. Gotcha. So people first and profit with purpose is our mantra. And that's what makes One Oak Financial, I think, a little bit different.
Did you mention that One Oak is 50 states?
No, I may have mentioned it here, but we are coast to coast, and we have Hawaii. And so our January, who was in Hawaii, also covers Alaska also.
Okay.
But yeah, we are licensed in all 50 states.
Okay.
We're licensed with the SEC. We're licensed with every insurance commissioner in the country, including our good friends in New York State, which many people are not. And then and one of the things I really believe about being a fiduciary, and it's a book, there's a chapter in the book. It's actually chapter 4 that talks about what being a fiduciary is.
Mm-hmm.
A fiduciary means that you're doing everything that's in the best interest of the client.
Mm-hmm.
And if your products are limited, right? My good friend Tom Hegna says, you don't go play golf with just a 7-iron.
Yeah.
You have a whole set of clubs to play golf with. And he's like, a lot of firms show up with only a 7-iron.
Yeah.
And no matter what your problems are, you're getting a 7-iron. And that's not what a real fiduciary is.
Well, and they make you adapt to their situation, not the other way around, right? As a fiduciary, it's a relationship of trust. It's what we have in California in the real estate side. Literally, we're fiduciaries here, right?
Right.
And so being a fiduciary means it's a relationship of trust. Trust is doing what's in the best interest of your clients first, right? And yeah, you'll make money from it, but you're helping them first to get to where it is that they want to be.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Mike Milligan, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited to have you back to go over your book. Show us your book one more time. It's the one-of-a-kind financial plan, and it's dedicated to Jonathan.
That's right. And it's available on Amazon.
You can available on Amazon. There you go.
And you can connect with me at mikemilligan.com.
Perfect.
And then you'll find out more about One Oak Financial there. If you want to go to that site, it's the number one, oakfinancial.com.
Beautiful. Thank you, bud. I sure appreciate you being here. We'll see you soon. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.